Kyle Busch is expected to have more sponsor announcements before the end of 2022. The SRX is moving over to ESPN in 2023, and Daniel Ricciardo confirms that he will not race in NASCAR or IndyCar in 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off by talking about Alpha Prime Racing. As tomorrow, December 13th, they will have a big announcement. It's unclear what the announcement will be, but I would think it will be a driver announcement. Some people indicate it could be Stephen Parsons, and Stephen Parsons still has not announced his 2023 plans at this point. They already have announced a couple drivers that will drive for the team. Ryan Ellis and Sage Karam, they have been confirmed to the team for next year, but a lot of people indicate it could be a Stephen Parsons announcement. Really cool to see what happens, and we'll see who drives for Alpha Prime Racing, but they've got a big announcement coming up here tomorrow. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about William Sawalich. As it was announced on Friday that William Sawalich will drive for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023 in ARCA, driving the number 18 for 20 races. He'll also compete for the 2023 ARCA East Championship, and Joe Gibbs Racing will compete for the ARCA Owners Championship as well. He also signed a multi-year deal with Joe Gibbs Racing. For those of you who don't know who William Sawalich is an up-and-coming talent. He's only 16 years old, but this kid has been on my radar for the last year. I think he won 15 late model races, and he's a very underrated driver who I really think has a lot of potential to one day be a NASCAR Cup Series champion. And Toyota is making big moves to try to, and big splashes to try to get as much talent back in their series as possible. So it's really exciting news for William. I think William is going to win a lot of races next year, considering the people he'll be competing against. I expect that William is going to show what he's capable of, and I think he will be a threat to win a lot of races with Joe Gibbs Racing next year. Good to see the Williams getting an opportunity to race with the team in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar. Now, we got a couple IndyCar reports that we need to talk about. The first one we're talking about is a report from Adam Sturt. And according to him, he says, during the offseason, something called itself the IndyCar Drivers Association sent a letter to 5 very senior members of Penske Entertainment, asking for IndyCar to step up its marketing. It went down like a cup of cold vomit with those on top. Now, luckily, the good news is that they're actually making some big marketing moves. There's been a lot of pressure from a lot of drivers and a lot of people in the industry to market IndyCar a lot better. That's one of the IndyCar's biggest issues. The only race they generally market is the Indy 500. And if you're going to want IndyCar to grow, you've got to market every single race to really grow this series. NASCAR's had a problem with that a little bit as well, but they've been doing a lot better marketing the races, and their attendance and people watching has gone up from the first time for NASCAR since 2018. We saw an increase in TV ratings. This right here is what IndyCar is going to have to do, is increase, which they're going to be giving a bigger budget to the person that's coming in, which I think is really massive for the series. So they got to continue building up, and if they can do that, I think it will help IndyCar long term, but they need to continue to make sure that they go ahead and keep marketing series and hope for it to grow long term. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar once again. As reported by Adam Stern on Saturday, that NBC Sports had first dibs at securing the IndyCar docuseries. But the network passed in part because it liked the idea of another media company promoting the property. Obviously, there is going to be an IndyCar docuseries that's going to be coming out, which will be on the CW and Vice. Now, CW doesn't have a really young audience, a much older audience, but Vice has a much younger audience. Also, NBC, if they would have had the docuseries, they probably would have put it on Peacock, which would have really hurt the series and their growth. The goal of this docuseries is to grow the series. So NBC made a really great move right here. And in all honesty, they should have done this with NASCAR as well, where they should have had it on Netflix or another streaming service as big like Amazon, but it is what it is. But I love that they're making big moves right here. NBC doing a really good job right here to try to market its own brand and its own series. So it's a good thing that they're basically letting it happen where they're going to a different series. I think it makes a lot of sense, and very happy to see that they've actually made a really good decision right here. I think this is a fantastic decision, and very happy to see that they're doing this, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about ARCA. As was announced on Saturday, that ARCA will have all 20 ARCA races on broadcast on FS1 and FS2. 14 races will be on FS1, and 6 of those races will be on FS2. This is huge because this will be the first time that every single ARCA race will be on a Fox network of television. ARCA has been on Fox, I think, since 1997, but this is the first time it will be on every single FS1 race. And why is this huge for ARCA? Well, one of the big reasons is will help ARCA grow its popularity. I think they've making some really good decisions over the last year. Their car counts actually have gone up, which is really great for ARCA. But also, what this also means, it'll be more money for the teams as well, because if more people are watching, the more money that they're going to get with the TV deal. Obviously, they signed a multi-year extension with Fox, I think, through 2024. This is huge for ARCA, and it means that every single race will be able to be watched live. Because one of the things that MAV TV, and this is no disrespect to MAV TV, but MAV TV does not have as big of a reach as Fox does and FS1 does. Granted, FS1 and FS2 probably aren't going to get like over 1 million except maybe 1 or 2 races. But you're going to see a huge increase in popularity in ARCA and people watching, meaning more money for the teams and more people watching. So I think this is an absolutely amazing move for ARCA. I'm really excited about this, and I cannot wait to see that ARCA is going to be joining every single race. They had 12 last year, so the fact that every single race will be on the Fox family networks, I think is absolutely incredible. I think it's amazing and really exciting to see that they are going to be returning to every single race on Fox in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the ASA. As it was announced on Saturday that the ASA is officially returning in 2023. The Super Late Model Series is now the ASA Stars National Tour. Now, the goal for the ASA, it'll be a 10-race series that will end in the All-American 400 in Nashville. For those who do not know, the ASA was around back in the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, but I believe it disbanded around 2003 or 2004. So it's been a long time since the ASA has been around. This is huge for late model racing and racing as a whole for the ASA to officially return, because it was such a legendary series back in the day. So I think this is such an incredible move for racing as a whole, and it's incredible to see that the ASA is going to be officially returning in 2023. I cannot wait to see that it's coming back. I hope we get to see some televised race on some of the big networks. I think that would be incredible. I think it will be televised on Racing America and Flow Racing throughout the season. But I think this is really, really amazing and fantastic news for the ASA as a whole, and excited to see that the ASA is officially returning in 2023. Really excited to see that it is returning. Really exciting news. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. As it was reported by Austin Konetsky from Sportsnet that Dale Jr. spoke on the playoff format on a podcast with Brian France. Remember that big Brian France podcast? I didn't really talk much about that, but he spoke on the playoff format on there, and he says, I wish we could figure out a way to make the championship moment not an all-or-nothing 3-hour affair. He's not the only one, by the way, that has been outspoken about this. Denny Hamlin has also been very outspoken about the playoff format as well. And it shows that a lot of people in the industry are really frustrated with the playoff format. But I also agree with Dale Jr. that it should not be one race to determine. What I think it should be, I think it should be 3 races to determine who wins the championship. I think it should be 3 different types of tracks, or somewhere David Lance suggested on his channel about a week ago. I think it should be 3 races to determine a champion. You get the 4 best drivers all season long, and basically have the regular season a little bit longer, and then you shorten how long the playoffs is, and you get the 4 best drivers all year to compete for a 3-race championship. Therefore, you don't have people getting frustrated with how long the playoffs are, because I think 3 months is absolutely ridiculous and really, really insane. I think you need to make the playoffs a lot more shorter, and I think that maybe should be a best 4 drivers all year and 3 races to determine. Therefore, you have a pretty fair champion, in my opinion. And basically, you still have that 1-race championship where you're not going to have everybody eliminated. Or we can just get rid of the playoffs altogether and go through and run a full season. I think that would make a lot of sense, and I think more people would end up watching. But we're not going to go in that area. So, in all seriousness, I hope they can make changes long term. They're probably not going to make changes in the short term, but I do think in the long term, they may be able to make some changes, and I do hope they do make some changes long term in the playoff format, because I think a lot of people, including like myself, are frustrated with the playoff format, and they want to see some changes to the playoff format long term. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. Now, there was a video that came out from 2311 Racing on Friday talking about Tyler Reddick's first day at the 2311 Racing shop. He's basically spoke on his first day at the shop, and he is really excited going into 2023. Obviously, Tyler Reddick will be driving the 45 car for 2311 Racing in 2023, and he's very excited to drive for the organization next season. I think Tyler Reddick is going to have a pretty big year at 2311 Racing next season. I don't think he's going to be in the championship 4 or win the championship or nothing, but I do think he's an underdog to win the championship. I think he easily is going to make the round of 8 in 2023. I think he'll be a threat to win some races. I just think he's going to win a couple races next year. He might win as many races as he did in 2022. I think gets a few victories, and I think that 45 car is going to be as fast as it was near the end of the season in 2022. I really look at 2311 Racing to have a pretty massive year as an organization, and if you're a Tyler Reddick fan, you have to be really excited. And if you're a 2311 Racing fan as well, you really have to be excited that you're going to be seeing Reddick over at that team next year. There's a lot of great things going on with the team, and I'm excited to see what Reddick can do with 2311 Racing. It's exciting to see that he's driving for the team next year, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch Tyler Reddick at 2311 Racing in 2023. A big year coming up for that team. They're going to have, I think, their best year they've ever had as an organization, and I think he'll be an underdog to root for in the championship overall in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart Friesen. As Stewart Friesen put out a tweet yesterday confirming that he will be returning in 2023 in the number 52 truck. Now, in that tweet, he basically says, stay tuned. There's a lot of rumors around a potential of Halmer Friesen racing in the truck series. There's some talk right now that there could be a second truck with maybe Lane Riggs driving the truck full-time in 2023. That is a possibility, but that is not confirmed. But I am also very excited to see the Halmer Friesen Racing will be returning in 2023. Stewart Friesen, of course, coming off a very solid year. I don't remember if he won a race or not this past year, but he was very competitive in that number 52 truck. He actually had a chance to make the championship for this year in the Camping World Truck Series. And I feel like Halmer Friesen Racing as a year, well, he actually won Texas, but I think that Stewart Friesen will be an underdog for the championship. I think this team is an underdog team, and they've been getting faster and faster. They'll probably get some stuff from Tricon Garage, which is David Gillen Racing now, and I think that team will be very, very solid. I expect in 2023, Stewart Friesen gets a win or two next year, and I think that he will have a shot at the championship 4. You're not going to have John Hunter Nemechek next year, and you're not going to have Chandler Smith competing, and you're probably not going to have a couple other guys competing as well. Of course, you'll still have guys like Carson Hosford to compete against, and probably the ThorSport guys, which will have, of course, Haley Deegan drive for ThorSport more than likely next year when that gets officially announced, and other drivers who will be very competitive in 2023. But I'm very excited to see that Stewart Friesen is returning in 2023 to the organization, and it's really exciting to see that he's back with Halmer Friesen Racing. That team expect to make some pretty big announcements here in the future, and I think you got to be really excited if you're a fan of Halmer Friesen Racing. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Todd Gillen and Michael McDowell. Now, there was a charity effort that basically came out that's going to be happening here, I believe, this Friday with Metallica partnering up with Farmer Motorsports for a major charity effort. And Bob Pockers knows that while it's not been announced at this time officially, he expects that Todd Gillen and Michael McDowell will return to their respective rides in 2023. Michael McDowell driving the number 34 car and Todd Gillen in the number 38. Now, Michael McDowell is expected to have a new crew chief. He'll have Travis Peterson in that as a crew chief for him in 2023. But Todd Gillen will have a new crew chief next year. Seth Barber will become the technical director of Farmer Motorsports in 2023. Both drivers had a very respectful 2022. Michael McDowell had a career year outside of not winning a race in 2022. He had a really strong 2022 where he was an underdog for the playoffs. And Todd Gillen really improved as the year progressed and became a much faster driver as the season progressed and did a really solid job and actually was up front in a couple races, including at the Indy Road Course where he's up front competing. Farmer Motorsports hopefully can take some major steps forward. I have a bad feeling McDowell may take some steps backwards, though, next year because McDowell will not have Blake Harris as a crew chief, and Blake Harris, in my opinion, is a really, really good crew chief. So I am very nervous that they will lose a little bit of that performance that they had. But I think you look at this team, I think they will have a very solid season, and Of course, we already know at this point, too, that Zane Smith will make his select starts at front row in 2023, including in the 2023 Daytona 500. While the number has not been revealed, I would think the number 36 is what the number is going to end up being for 2023, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. That being said, though, if you're a front row motorsports fan, you do have to be really excited about this and excited to see that both drivers are going to be returning. Both drivers really good in my opinion, and I think front row could take some big steps forward in 2023, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens if that does end up coming to fruition in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joshua Licky. Now, Josh Licky had teased an announcement last week. They'd be having a big announcement today. Well, his announcement actually came out today from multiple reporters, including Davey Siegel and Casey Campbell and also JSki.com, that Josh Licky will be driving part-time for Live Fast Motorsports in 2023, driving the number 78 car. Ziegler will be a sponsor for every single one of the races that he is in, and his first start will come at Circuit of the Americas. Josh Licky, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated drivers in the NASCAR garage. He's been a driver that's outperformed the equipment that he's been in for the last couple of seasons, had some very solid runs at Alpha Prime Racing. He didn't do fantastic with Spire Motorsports, but then again, you can't really expect Spire Motorsports to be overall the fastest organization. But I think this is a really good move for Live Fast Motorsports to bring Josh Licky in for select number of races. Now, how many races do I think he's going to run? My prediction is I think it's probably will be around 12 to 15. He's probably going to run all the road course races next year and probably a couple other races as well. Now, I do expect that BJ McLeod will also make quite a few starts next year in the number 78. Now, what are my overall expectations for Josh Licky in 2023? Well, I think Josh Licky will have some good runs next year. Well, some decent runs, especially on the road courses. But Live Fast Motorsports as a team, of course, are switching to Chevy. So the hope is that they will be a faster organization in 2023. What I'm worried with is how fast their team will be. Because, again, I don't know how they're going to do. Because they have struggled over the last couple of years. They haven't been the fastest group. And the hope is with the change to ECR engines, they can be much quicker. I think Josh Licky gets 1 or 2 top 30s. I know that's kind of a little bit low expectations, but you can't have the highest expectations, especially for a team like Live Fast Motorsports. You can't have the highest expectations. But I think he will have some good runs next year in this car at the road courses, and it will help their team that they can have someone who has the experience, who is a good driver to drive the car. I also think this indicates that BJ is going to run a lot less this year because, of course, BJ McLeod is getting older. I think he's 39 years of age. He'll be around 40 years old at this point, so he probably wants to start giving up-and-coming talent an opportunity. Now, who could else drive for Live Fast Motorsports? Maybe Garrett Smithley. Garrett Smithley is joining for BJ McLeod Motorsports in the Xfinity Series, so he could drive his car. But I think this is, in all seriousness, a really great opportunity for Josh Licky going into 2023. I think if you're a fan of Josh Licky, you've got to be really excited and really pumped up that he is getting this opportunity. So excited to see that Josh Licky is getting an opportunity to drive for Live Fast Motorsports in 2023, and hopefully he can make the best of it going into the 2023 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday evening that Daniel Ricciardo is not planning to do a one-off in NASCAR in 2023 per source, but remains focused on growing his brand in the United States off of Drive to Survive, which he's had 60% of his clothing line sold thanks to Drive to Survive. It also was basically confirmed at this point that he will not be racing in IndyCar in 2023 as well. This is a really disappointing news because Daniel Ricciardo's name has been brought up in the conversations over the last 2 weeks about him potentially racing in NASCAR. And a lot of people have been really wanting to see him in NASCAR. But he's afraid of racing on ovals, it seems like, when it was indications that he's really afraid of ovals. But I do think another thing that really affected this was the fact that he became the 3rd driver at Red Bull, where he'll be the reserve driver and will help the team out and will get some time to practice with Red Bull, which I'll be honest with Daniel Ricciardo here. Daniel Ricciardo is probably not, unless Sergio Perez loses his ride at Red Bull. I don't see Daniel Ricciardo getting an opportunity to drive for Red Bull, or maybe never getting an opportunity to race in Formula 1 again, to be honest. He really struggled this past year in Formula 1 for McLaren, and people say, well, McLaren wasn't that great. Well, Lando Norris was the only driver to get a podium outside of the top 6 in points that weren't the big 3 teams. It was the only driver. So I think Daniel Ricciardo is making a little bit of a mistake to not do a one-off. And obviously, Trackhouse Racing, the Project 91 car, is for superstars. If Daniel Ricciardo wants to really grow his brand in the United States, I think it would be huge for him to come over to NASCAR and grow his brand. He will get a lot of people over. Plus, I think if Ricciardo had come over to NASCAR, he would have grown the sport a little bit by bringing a lot of those Daniel Ricciardo fans who are maybe the biggest NASCAR fans in the world. They would have watched NASCAR because they would have saw Daniel Ricciardo's name. Also, I think Daniel Ricciardo would have been really competitive if he drove this 91 car, because you have to remember, this Trackhouse Racing Project 91 car, this team was very, very fast at Watkins Glen with Kimi Räikkönen, which made their debut. Also, you have to remember that Trackhouse Racing nearly won the championship this year with Ross Chastain. So if Ricciardo would have driven this car, he would have been very, very quick, very competitive. He would have been in a race-winning caliber car. So this is very disappointing news, and he had a lot of opportunities. We're getting more racetracks on the circuit, and we got more people that are coming into this sport, and NASCAR would have grown a little bit more, especially on the weekend that Ricciardo would have ran. So it is very disappointing. I mean, I respect why he doesn't want to. Again, he wants to still race in Formula One, but I don't know if he'll get an opportunity to race in Formula One in 2024 or 2025, because I think Ricciardo is 36 years old right now. So he's getting up there in age. He's getting older. And will a F1 team give him the opportunity? I don't know if they are going to give him the opportunity. This would have been a really cool opportunity for him to drive the Project 91 car. So it is very disappointing that he will not be racing in NASCAR at all in 2022 or 2023 for that matter. It's very disappointing. And again, it's very frustrating because he had a car that was capable of winning races and would have had a car that would have been up front. So it's very disappointing and frustrating. Hopefully get other guys to get in that car, maybe like a Shane Van Gisbergen to drive that car. I know he's had conversations with Project 91. Brady Kosecki's name's also been brought up in the conversations as well. Maybe a few other F1 drivers like a Sebastian Vettel could drive this car, or maybe Julio Castroneves can get an opportunity to drive this car. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but very disappointed that Daniel Ricciardo will not be racing in NASCAR at all in 2023. That's very disappointing, but it is what it is, and it's his decision, and you do have to respect it. I'm just disappointed as a Daniel Ricciardo fan that he will not get an opportunity to race in NASCAR in a race-winning caliber entry in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode, as we are talking about the SRX. As it was announced this morning that the SRX has partnered up with ESPN to bring back Thursday Night Thunder. This is a multi-year deal with ESPN, and their season is going to start on July 13th, and it will end on August 17th. Currently, at this moment, they have not announced the drivers or the tracks, but it will also be a 6-race season. This also confirms the SRX is going to be at least around for the next couple of years. This is really, really huge for a lot of reasons, and here is why. First, this is a return of Thursday Night Thunder. For those of you who probably were not around, Thursday Night Thunder was a massive thing back in the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s as well. They brought like racing series like the late models and USACs and other forms of racing on, and introduced us to drivers like Jeff Gordon, who became a 4-time NASCAR Cup Series champion and one of the legends of NASCAR as well. We got introduced to him from the USAC days. We also got introduced, I believe, to Tony Stewart, a successful USAC driver at the time when he got introduced, but of course a 3-time NASCAR Cup Series champion and a championship caliber owner as well, and has went on to win 49 NASCAR Cup Series races and a lot of other races as well. The Thursday Night Thunder returning will be big, I think, for the SRX as well for a lot of reasons. This also is a really big deal because of the upcoming NASCAR TV deal. Now, why do I mention NASCAR? Well, obviously, the SRX is a motorsport, and basically ESPN has been dabbling themselves back in motorsports over the last year. They've been basically dabbling their way back into motorsports and getting interested in motorsports once again. They've been covering motorsports a lot more frequently. Yes, there's been some of the crazy moves that have happened, but I've noticed that they have been covering motorsports a little bit more frequently. Now, ESPN has not hosted NASCAR since 2014. They left NASCAR after the most recent TV deal, albeit the relationship was kind of a little bit rocky. But I think this is a big move, though, for motorsports as a whole, because it's going to grow the SRX brand. Them being on Thursday night on prime time on ESPN when there aren't really going to be any really big obligations, things that are going to mess with it, I think you have to be really excited about that. Plus, it really won't be going up against NASCAR, which will be on its own night, Thursday night, which will help the ratings a lot, because that's one thing that I think hurt the SRX this past year was they got affected when they were on CBS. They got affected by the fact that they were going up against some NASCAR races at the time, and that was a really bad move on the SRX's part to go up against NASCAR. They were up against a truck race in Knoxville, and it was a really big disaster for both parties. Both parties struggled in the TV ratings department. So them not going up against NASCAR, really great decision right there. And starting in the middle of July, I think that's also a really fantastic decision on Thursday night, and a return of summer night. Thursday night short track racing, I think, is absolutely phenomenal as well for the series. And I think it will help grow the brand of the SRX. Now, the big question is, who will be joining the series and what drivers will be joining? Well, I think Tony Stewart will be there. I think Bobby Labonte will be back. I think Julio Castroneves will be back. But maybe they get some new, fresh faces. Get a guy like a Kyle Busch in this series. Get Kyle Larson to run a series. Kyle Larson would be a big name to bring, especially on the dirt scene. Bring him back into the racing scene. Haley Deegan, get her back to run. A lot of her fans would watch this series. Bring her back. Bring drivers like Chase Elliott in the series again. Chase Elliott brought a lot of fans over into the series, and I don't remember if he won last year, and I don't think he won last time we were here. But I think it would be great to bring him back and run some dirt races and some of those other races as well. You got to branch out and get as many different people in as you can as well. And I think the SRX is making some really good moves. They were making some bad moves, especially with how the championship ended, with how they basically determined who won the title. Marco Andretti, of course, won last championship. There were some obligations and some controversy around that. Eventually, the SRX did clear that situation up, but still, how that ended was a little bit shaky and a little bit frustrating. But I will say that if the SRX can make the championship right and basically not focus on the championship and focusing on the racing as a whole once again, honestly, there shouldn't be a championship. Just let the racing happen. There should be no SRX champion, and just let the racing go. But I think the SRX making some great moves. Don Hawk's doing a great job as CEO of the series right now, and I think the SRX is making some really great moves toward the long-term future going into 2023. They'll announce lineups of drivers in the not-so-distant future, and we'll see if we make some new stars in 2023, including some up-and-coming talent that may be able to help the series going forward in 2023. Excited to see what the SRX has got in store. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kyle Busch. Now, over the last week, and really for the last year, we've been focusing on Kyle Busch when it comes to sponsorship announcements. Last week, Kyle Busch made a major sponsorship announcement where he'll have 5 different sponsors confirmed for 2023, that being Lenovo, 3Tri, Cheddar Scratch Kitchen, and a couple other companies that will sponsor him, Alsco Uniforms, and I think there was one more, if I'm not mistaken, that will sponsor him, and BetMGM will sponsor him in 2023. Well, according to a report from Next Line Racing, Tori Galita, who is the president of Richard Childress Racing, who's on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, he says the team will have a couple more sponsorship announcements for the number 8 car of Kyle Busch before the end of the 2022 season. They also note that the new number 8 cell was Kyle's idea in design by Kyle with input from Richard Childress. This is really, really huge because this confirms that they are not completely sold out on the sponsorship. Now, Cheddar Scratch Kitchen is going to sponsor the 8 car for a lot more races than they did with Tyler Reddick. They've already revealed a couple of the cars. Both cars, I think, look really, really solid. I do think the number 8 car looks pretty good. It looked bad when they did the render, when they revealed the render, but I think it actually looks a lot better when you look at the Lionel's pictures, and I think the Alsco car is very decent as well, and I think it's a little bit better than the Cheddar Scratch Kitchen car, in my opinion. We go back and talk about the potential sponsor that Kyle Busch could end up having. What companies could Kyle Busch end up being sponsored by? Well, I think there's a couple of potential companies that could sponsor. One of them is Realtree. Realtree has been a big partner of Richard Childress Racing for the last couple of seasons, and I think that company could sponsor Kyle Busch. Now, I think they are also going to sponsor Austin Dillon next season as well, since they've been a big Richard Childress Racing partner. I think they would end up sponsoring him. The other 2 companies that I think that could sponsor Kyle Busch, one of those is Hot Wheels. Hot Wheels actually has sponsored Richard Childress Racing in the past. I think they sponsored Tyler Reddick in 2021 in a couple races, and that would be a great company to come in and sponsor Kyle Busch as well. The other big company that I think, though, will be a frontrunner, and I think the most likely sponsor is Sling. Now, Sling, for those who have not been paying attention over the last few months, Sling has thrown their name in the conversation as a potential sponsor for Kyle Busch. to the point that even Lefty, also Noah Sweet, had a design of the car. Now, Noah Sweet did note on his Twitter, I believe, that basically he noted that that car was just a design. It's not an official sponsor announcement. But he wouldn't have had that cooking up and had it right away if they wouldn't have tweeted. It came out not much. The tweet didn't come out much after. So I think that will be a potential sponsor for Kyle Busch. But this also, in a sense, kind of makes Joe Gibbs Racing look a little bit bad. The fact that Kyle Busch basically has sponsors already sold out basically for the year and could still have more sponsorship coming for 2023, that will make Joe Gibbs Racing look really, really bad. And we know that Joe Gibbs Racing is having some issues right now when it comes to their future sponsorships, including with FedEx, which right now their contract is up in 2023. Granted, they do have a chance of signing after 2023, and they could sign a couple-year extension with Joe Gibbs Racing, but we are getting into January. Now, the big difference between FedEx and M&M's is M&M's in for Joe Gibbs Racing all the way back a year, about in the summer, that they would not be returning, and they were still searching for sponsorship. And I do think they were trying to find a full season sponsor because Joe Gibbs wanted a full season sponsor for Kyle Busch. And normally that does not happen anymore, where you do get a full season sponsorship. And now it comes in basically multiple different races. And I'll say this to be fair to Joe Gibbs Racing, I do think that they basically were looking full season sponsor. Richos Racing, they were looking for just a bunch of different sponsors, and they had a bunch of existing companies and maybe other new companies that were going to sponsor Kyle Busch. So I think it's really huge for the sport regardless, and I think that for Kyle Busch as well, that he's got more sponsors that are willing to work with him. And I think if you're a Kyle Busch fan, you do have to be excited going into 2023. I think he's going to be a legit championship threat as a driver this upcoming season. I think he's going to be very, very fast in 2023. And the fact he's got more sponsors that are showing interest in him is really, really big. And talk about the number 8 font. I've seen a lot of people talking about this number 8 font going into that. I think the number 8 font actually is good in my opinion. It's not perfect. I still like the old 8 font, but I do like that they're changing the number 8 font up to have a new different fitting of the branding of that car. I think having a new fitting makes a lot of sense as well, and I think it's really cool to see that they're basically changing up the font on that. I know some people disagree with me on that, but I do like the number 8 font. But if you're a Kyle Busch fan going next year, you got to be really pumped up and really excited, and it's good to see that more sponsors continue to show interest in wanting to work with Kyle Busch. Those sponsorship announcements will probably come out before Christmas time, so probably in the next couple of weeks, we'll know more about some of these upcoming sponsorship announcements. So, anyway, that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links go to below that, and comment below your thoughts on today's video. What companies do you think will sponsor Kyle Busch in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the SRX joining ESPN in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're either going to have the 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series predictions, or we'll likely have a Stewart-Haas Racing preview. I'll probably put a poll out later today for you guys to vote on. Wednesday, likely NASCAR news video, and we're expecting a lot of news as we get closer to Christmas time and close out the end of 2022 as we get close to 2023. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.